turn come off microphone and turn on your camera, we will get going here. Okay, welcome everyone to today's edition of Rising Tide. I'm Lauren Fernandez, CEO and founder of Full Course. Today's topic is all things franchisee secrets. We want to hear from the daily operators and the vendors who support franchising, all of the secrets around stable revenues in your business, preparing and prioritize for your scale. Today, we have with us Tim Pawlowski, a friend of mine from my days at Chicken Salad Chick and fellow franchisee. And he also is going to share with us in a second a new brand that he's adding to his franchise portfolio, and Jonathan Martin of Pivotal Accounting. And so, guys, I'd love to start today, if we may, by briefly just handing the microphone over to you and let us know a little bit about your story. Give us a little bit of background and why it is that you're connected to the world of restaurants and franchising. Let's start with Jonathan today. Jonathan, could you share a little bit about it yourself for the team out here and let us know a little bit more about your connection to franchising?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. Love what you guys do over at Full Course. So this is exciting for me. So thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, the franchising kind of happened accidentally with me. I had a bookkeeping business that I started in 2008 and stumbled across a multi-unit franchisee that just was not getting clean, timely, accurate financial statements. So I started an accounting firm with two other partners, and we grew that to about 3,000 locations over the course of 11, 12 years, providing just reliable bookkeeping services. And along the way, obviously, you get involved with franchisees that are seeking guidance when they're looking to buy other franchisees or looking to buy into new brands. And so it all kind of just snowballed from there. So I've been involved with dozens and dozens of brands on the multi-unit level of franchisees that are looking to get into it for the first time, or maybe they have 4 locations and they want to get to 40. And so I've been able to kind of be involved with a lot of those conversations and advise those people to, make the right decisions when it comes to accounting and financial services along the way.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Jonathan. It's helpful background for us to have today from the not only the vendor perspective, but that financial point of view, which we are going to touch on in more detail in just a second. Tim, could you share a little bit about your journey into the world of franchising and where you're headed now?
Absolutely. And you can hear me, correct?
Mhm.
Perfect. Lauren, first of all, thank you for having me. This is it's an honor having known you for so long, and you've mentored Kelly and me on so many things. But my journey started about 12 years ago. It was a way to kind of escape I always like to say, the bondage of corporate America, thinking that at some point I might get laid off. And so as a traveling sales guy, I happened to bump into a brand called Chicken Salad Chick, and I just kept following the process. And next thing you know, I was like, I think I'd be too crazy. I was looking for a way to say no, but no never presented itself. The people were great, and I just enjoyed the thought process. So as I kind of moved through it, my partner, my wife, Kelly, and I, we decided to franchise. We have 4 current stores right now. We just actually hit our 11-year anniversary in our first store, Savannah, and about to have our second anniversary of our next store will be 10 years here for our Puller store. So we're very excited, very blessed to have been doing this, and we would not look back and change anything.
Hmm. And you're looking to become a multi-brand operator pretty soon here. Are you willing to tell everyone what the new brand is?
Sure. It's a place called Vicious Biscuit. Vicious Biscuit is out of the Charleston area, and literally just a chance bumping into somebody at the dog park. You never know where you're going to find your next lead. We started looking at the brand, and quite honestly, they had a lot of the same styles and values that we were looking for, that we found when we managed to come upon Chicken Salad Chick. So from that point, we've signed on for about 3 stores, and we're really excited about growing our brand in the fast casual space.
Yeah, so both of you run your own businesses. You've been in the industry now for a minute. I want to ask the question, what is it about franchising that attracts you to this style of entrepreneurial venture? Because clearly you all have built businesses. Why franchising? Tim, could you answer first?
Sure. I think Lauren, the fact was is that we had an engine, but we didn't have a car around it. We're not the home of the original idea. So we looked, quite honestly, Chicken Salad Chick kind of caught us a little bit off guard. And we realized the values and the business model and the way the experience they brought to their guests and all that kind of stuff. It was something we knew we could replicate and do because we had a lot of energy. We have a lot of, my wife, partner, we knew we had a way to make it work with her schedule and with mine. And it was just a matter of, do we do it or not? And we did the gut check and we decided, let's do this. We can do this. So that's how we got into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm hearing there is it was flexible for you and Kelly. You had
Hmm.
kids at the
Yep,
time, you both
that's
were
right.
working. And I've always been very impressed with how the two of you, as a husband and wife team, as a family, have balanced that kind of work and entrepreneurship and family. You always have done a great job of that. And I think the key to that is the flexibility that these models provide.
Absolutely, because I know that when I got started, when we went to the bank, because let's face it, a lot of people need money to kind of do the startup capital. The first question they had for me was I planning on quitting my job
Mhm.
at the time? And I said, well, what do you need me to do? And they basically said, we need you to keep working so that you play it safe. And then she would do that part. And I think that's one of the things that I've mentioned to other folks that, you know,
Mhm.
each store has been like a child to us. It's, you birth it, you raise it. So you really have to have one of the partners kind of shepherding the business through the process. And of course, everybody else tends to help out like a village. But we really needed that flexibility that you just mentioned.
Heard, agree.
Hmm.
Jonathan, what are your thoughts? Clearly, you have really focused your business and your services to this niche of the industry. Why is that?
So, kind of to piggyback off of what Tim said, I find myself working with franchisees very often when they're trying to get financing to either expand or acquire or
Mhm.
to buy the first one.
Mhm.
And I love it because I think anytime I talk to people about franchising, whether it's at dinner or just, in a business environment, people kind of miss how big franchising really is in the United States. And I think I read the other day that a new franchise opens in the US every 8 minutes or something like that, which is just crazy if you think about the macro level of what that means. I mean, we're talking about 8 to 9% of the GDP for the country.
Mhm.
And most people who aren't involved in franchising just they drive by a Jimmy John's or drive by a Chick-fil-A and they just kind of go, oh yeah, that place is all right and it's good food and they don't really think about it. For me, there's something really awesome about helping a franchisee because it's a small business owner. At the end of the day, whether you have one location or 100 locations, you're a small business owner. And in the franchise space, I think it really gives people opportunity to, find their financial success that they want and grow a business and own it and be proud of it. And like Tim said, it's every store is his baby. And you feel that whether you're an accounting provider or you're a lender and you're talking to a franchisee looking to, accomplish some sort of growth, there's nothing more satisfying than seeing that happen and watching a small business owner go from one location to 4 or 5 or 10. And there's so many things to think about along the way, but I love being part of that. I just think it's a massive part of the economy that people sometimes overlook if they're not involved in it. So I, I,
Mhm.
I just love it. It seems I talk about franchising way more often than my wife cares to talk about, but I love every facet of it. It's great.
So, Jonathan, you're regularly working with franchisees who are looking to scale, right? They're in it to get the sort of volume and the returns that come with scaling the business up a little bit more
Right.
aggressively. What are some of the things, and I'm going to say key performance indicators here, but like, what are some of the
Right.
signals that you see on the numbers side, but even just being adjacent to the business and observing the business that may signal to you like, okay, these folks are ready for scale. And I think the flip side as well, like what are some sort of red flags that you see that go, pump the brakes here. You may not be ready for unit 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah. So a couple things. I'd say primarily, I know we kind of laughed about this the other day when we talked about this, but I always tell franchisees, whether they're a first-time person or they've owned a couple locations for a few years, your accounting and your finances, like your financial wherewithal of the business, is so critical. It's critical for growth. It's critical for getting financing, for lining yourself up for a potential exit, which may not be for 5 or 10 years. But there's the biggest pitfall I see is when franchisees are starting to grow, they have their first location and they've hired, I don't know, a friend of the family to do their books, for example. And then they go to try to get financing and the bank goes, these books are a little awry, or you have things in weird places, or you didn't book, your capital infusion from the ownership the right way, or you took on an equity partner and you kind of have a weird structure. And I think franchisees try a lot of times to do that on their own, and it can tend to backfire. So, having clean, reliable financials and accounting and bookkeeping is so critical just out of the gate, in my opinion. And I've worked for top 20 CPA firms. I've run my own accounting firm, and now I'm running my own accounting firm again. And I've seen all walks of life in this space that all run into the same pitfalls. I've seen 10-unit guys who try to do their own books, which is crazy to me, because then you go, well, what's your time worth to you? Like, why are you doing this on your own? And then, when it comes to scaling, I think we talked about this topic before, but I think, being prepared for the unknown, and maybe this is a topic you're going to bring up later, but I think too many franchisees aren't thinking about, and Tim made a great point the other day talking about this, is you never know what the franchisor that you own a business in is going to do, or what's coming down the pipe in 6 months. It might be a new ultimatum that they decide that they're going to force on every owner to put something in their stores that's going to cost you $20, $40, $50,000 a store, and you weren't prepared for that. And I think thinking about things like that are just so critical as you're growing from 1 to 2 to 10, however many locations you're trying to get to.
Yeah, I want to put a pin in that because I want to come back to financing in just a second, because I think there's a
Sure.
lot to unpack there, especially in this current environment of, even if you want to scale and you're ready, that financing piece is a big piece of the equation, if not a barrier at this point. So let's definitely put a pin in that. Tim, I want to ask you from a people perspective, the same question. Like, how did you and Kelly know that it was time to scale, to go from unit to unit 2 to unit 3 and unit 4, and shift gears from being kind of owner operators to building out a team? Like, how did you know when that right time was in your journey?
Well, the first part of that question was, when you open up new stores. Obviously, as you remember, we all had an agreement that we signed to get some stores open in a certain amount of time. So we signed up for 4 stores. So that kind of went with like a 1 year per store average. So it was about a 4 year mark. We did it in about 4.5, maybe 5 years, because COVID was in that world. But for us, as we were looking at different areas, it was targets of opportunity. You kind of, you do your best to know your area, and the real estate kind of drove that part of the conversation. When we knew we had the right real estate, we knew we had to jump on it. It's just the way it is. We're not Publix, we're not Chick-fil-A, where you can kind of, drop, a ton of money to get that spot that is going to be a gem in 10 years. But you do know where you might have a gem that will produce for you right away. What was the second part of that question? I'm sorry.
Well, how did you guys make a decision to go from like it just being you and Kelly and like running the unit to like actually making the financial investment and the decision to build out a team to help run the units?
Some of that was a little bit of trial and error. I mean, we are, as Jonathan mentioned, small business owners, even if you got up to 100 of them, right? But I think what happened for us is that we always knew we had to have a bench of people. The rule in corporate America is that you're always hiring because you need to replace the bottom 10% at all times. I know it sounds ugly, but let's face it, that's the world we live in, and that's kind of probably some truth to that. So we're always trying to stay ahead of the curve. We always wanted to. If you have a few stores, one of the things we've learned is that you will always have a manager who will move, find for them what they think is a better opportunity. Spouse will move and they have to go with them, whatever the case may be. So in our case, we always wanted to have somebody ready. So we're always been in a growth mode with our bench. So I'd say when we went from 1 to 2, that's when we started acknowledging that had to happen. Because if not, what was going to clearly be the case for us is that either myself or my partner, wife Kelly, was going to have to go in the store and run them ourselves. And love franchising, but that is not exactly what we signed up for. We'll do it if we have to, but we're hoping that we have a bench of people ready to go. And besides, we're better at the big picture. Other people are what I call restaurant whisperers, the ones that can go in there and they know something's going on in the back and they see something on the guest up front, and somehow they manage to be at 2 places at one time.
And so like, Tim, is that to your point, like, is that the critical role? Like, you need to have those people who can, for you as an owner, be your eyes, your ears, the boots on the ground, and basically be operating partners, whether they are at that level or even down at a managerial level?
Yes, without a doubt. Because at the end of the day, we know that we don't know everything. So and it takes time to build these relationships with people. I mean, our director of operations, she's been with us for 9 years. We've got another manager, general manager. She's been with us for 7, and then we've got 2 other people that have been with us for a couple of years. So these relationships are critical for us. Our catering manager has been with us for probably about 8 years. So these relationships are kind of what helps sustain what we're doing, because they give us a lot of insight and they keep us going. Besides, the guests, they know these people like their family, just like we do. So there's a little cycle there that kind of feeds upon itself. Sometimes you do pay an extra dollar or two for these people, but if it keeps you from going gray, it is a big deal.
It's part of the cost of doing business, but I think the reality is sometimes for the above store G&A, right? For those above store expenses, a lot of owner operators are reluctant to add to that expense because it literally comes directly out of their margin. It comes out of their paycheck. But building out that team and that infrastructure above store is important, an important piece of scale. Let's just put it that way. I want to talk for a minute about, you do some excellent retention, Tim. You mentioned a financial incentive, whether you may pay a little bit better, but you have some pretty above market, like above normal retention of some of your key in-store leadership and above store leadership. Are there any sort of tips or tricks that you want to share with anyone today, just while we're on that topic?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a good question. We've spent a lot of time getting to know these folks and making sure that we acknowledge them. My wife, Lauren, she's real big. She knows the anniversaries. She knows what's going on. She knows if somebody's had something kind of major happen in their family life, and if any of the in birthdays, all that kind of stuff. So we make sure that we reach out and connect with folks on a human level, which it's not contrived. It's just one of those things that I had an operator at a Zaxby's one time when I was getting started. I said, well, what do you do? And he said, well, because I can't be there every day, I make sure I take notes on my people. So the next time I go in there, I can ask them about, hey, how is your dog, or how is, your spouse, and that kind of stuff. And I was like, well, that makes sense. It's human. So over time, you realize that people don't specifically work just for money. They work because they want to be acknowledged for the job they're doing, and they want to feel like they're a part of something. Some people want to feel like a part of something and own Tesla. Some people just want to know that they did a good job sweeping the sidewalk. It doesn't matter. They just want to feel a part of it. So that's been a big part of it. The other part for us, and this is why Vicious Biscuit and Chicken Salad Chick, and is that for us, Sundays, as you know, with Chicken Salad Chick, we're closed. That means our people have something in the retail space that is kind of hard to get, and that's a guaranteed day off, which, by the way, has served us really well to have Sundays off, because I have a day to breathe myself. And then Vicious Biscuit is open basically from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And when we were deciding on Vicious Biscuit, talking to the store managers and going around seeing them, they were very specific about how they, uh, this one assistant manager, how she could go to work, get off, and be there for her kids when they got out of school. And that was like light bulb. In a way, you kind of need to have a hook, and you need
Mm,
to be, I think, good stewards of your people. It doesn't mean that you don't release them when they don't fit your philosophies and all that kind of stuff, but it does mean that you kind of make them feel like they're important as part of the process.
yeah, that's great. Thank you for those insights.
Mhm.
Jonathan, I want to get a little tactical here now because Tim just shared with us some of his above store kind of G&A. And I'm going to state the obvious, but a lot of times in these growing multi-unit franchise organizations, multi-brand, multi-unit franchise organizations, the expense at the top above the units is people, right? Certain resources, whether it's a director of operations or it's centralized catering or marketing, et cetera. Talk to us a little bit about some of the best practices you have seen in some of the best operators on how to organize that, financial expense at the top. And let's get down another layer and then talk about what gets charged down to stores versus not. And let's unpack that a little bit because this is a really key part of ops. I don't think a lot of people plan for accordingly in their growth trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been involved with numerous transactions over the past couple of years where every single time a multi-unit owner is looking to exit or sell to maybe another owner or to a private equity group, every single time the conversation about G&A gets brought up because they're always scrutinizing it. And every multi-unit person who is going to sell their business or take on an equity partner has to be prepared to defend their G&A. Exactly to your point. And it's really a conundrum, right? Because if you have 4 or 5 locations and you want to scale to 10 or 20 locations, it's almost impossible. I use almost very strongly because it's almost impossible to keep your G&A from blowing up because you're running travel expenses. If you have to put a team of people on the ground in the middle of nowhere to open a store, that's going to cost you thousands and thousands of dollars over an extended multi-week, sometimes months period of time. And your G&A can skyrocket. And the next thing you know, you're trying to sell. And by the way, there's no perfect timing. So you never know when the day's going to come where you're going to go, oh, you know what? Today's the time to sell. And you might be in the middle of opening 2 stores. You don't know, right? The opportunities might just come out of nowhere where another owner is looking to acquire you. And you're like, okay, well, here are my financials. Hey, why was your G&A 7% of your revenue last year or last quarter? And you have to defend that. And so, to your other point, there are ways to strategize around keeping that low. And there are numerous ways to do it. And I'm sure we might lose the attention of some of these people going down to the rabbit hole. But there are ways such as, having that holding company or parent company is a must. I would encourage everybody that's got more than one location. Like if you have 2 units, have a holding company or a management company for starters.
Mm,
Um, what that allows you to do is to keep those higher level company wide people that are salaried, like an ops person or a COO or a CFO or something like that, above store level, because you also have to be able to defend your 4-wall EBITDA, which is a term I'm sure a lot of people on this call have heard. Anytime you're looking to get financing, they're always scrutinizing, what's your leverage? How many turns of debt do you have on your cash flow? And
mm,
all of those things are critical to defending your business valuation so you can go get financing or sell or take an equity partner. So you really have to be prepared. And that's why I started this conversation out by saying you've got to have people doing your accounting who know what they're doing, because you might get 3, 5 years down the road and it is really difficult to unwind some of those decisions financially and to go back and have to defend, well, yeah, here's what my P&L shows, but it's really this because, X, Y, and Z person, you don't really need to pay them if you buy me, right? But then the buyer's going, well, why do you have them on salary? Why are they hitting your G&A? Because obviously you need them, so don't I need them? And this could be hundreds of thousands of dollars in salaries and benefits and all the, travel. So it's really, you have to be forward thinking about structuring your financials in a way that you can defend at any given time.
yeah.
And the exclamation point on that is It's never going to be perfect. Your G&A is very rarely going to be in that 3 to 4% range. That's a sweet spot that everybody wants to see. But you can do it in a way where you can pull a couple of levers, and over a month or two, you can get it back down to where it needs to be. And if you want, we can talk about some strategies that we've done to do that. But just in general, that's what I would want people to be thinking about as a takeaway from this.
Yeah, such excellent points, Jonathan. I'm going to like kind of punctuate a couple of them. We also had a couple questions, going to hopefully like wrap an answer or two in here to the audience. So a couple of key concepts here. One is, as you're scaling, consider a management company to sit on the top of all of your operating units, where you can consolidate some of that expense that goes into just running the whole business, including some of the salaries that may occur.
Also, quick little hack for those of you who are considering a payroll provider. They don't want you to know this, but a lot of times if you're shopping for a new payroll provider, if you have a parent company that's got its own EIN and you run payroll through that, you can save yourself a fortune by running your payroll through your parent company versus running your payroll through every individual location. Because those fees add up, and in the payroll companies of the world, that's how they make so much money. And God bless them, they're serving a purpose that is important. Obviously, you got to pay your people, but if you do it the right way, you can save yourself a lot if you structure it the right way.
Yeah, there's also some interesting accounting that goes on. So you were talking about, the roll up at the top level where all of the money comes up, and you also have that top level corporate expense. And you think about it almost like a hierarchy. At the very top, you're looking at corporate EBITDA, right? Earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. EBITDA is basically a rough facsimile in the restaurant industry for profit, right?
Right.
At a store level, EBITDA, or SLEBITDA, as I've sometimes heard it called, a fun new term. I didn't grow up with that in my MBA program, but here it is, SLEBITDA. That P&L at the store, that profit and loss statement at the store level, that shows everything it takes to operate that unit and what kind of profit it's generating is sacrosanct. Like, that is so important to maintain. So when you have corporate expense, in my opinion, it's not always appropriate to charge back all of that expense down to the corporate stores, from corporate to the stores, but rather if it's directly supporting the profitability of that unit or the driving sales, for example, right? It makes sense, right? So I would encourage you to if you are an operator, if you are thinking of scale, these are fundamental things that have to be in place and should be correct before you go to scale. Because to your point, Jonathan, very hard to undo bad accounting once it happens, right? It can be done, but I've been in situations where it's so bad, we just start with a clean book entry and go forward. I've done that. So I think the takeaway here is get some proactive strategic advice before you scale about not just the legal form and structure, the implications for payroll and tax, but also for accounting purposes as well, for sure. So I want to make sure we kind of go back to some of the discussions around capital and resource planning. I think this is an interesting question. Tim, if you're willing to share kind of your philosophy on this, but funding for growing a business can come from any number of places. You can self-fund with your own, cash flow from the existing business. You can, reinvest your own dollars as an owner operator. You can get debt. You can bring on equity partners. There's a million different ways we could look at this. What are some of your thoughts, Tim, as an owner operator, about the sources of funding and how you view using those sources of funding to grow the business?
Well, I hate to say it, but I don't like being in debt. I guess I've listened to too much Dave Ramsey on the road. But the basic gist is, when we got into the business, we were moving, so we sold the house. We kept all that money in reserve, and that was the money that we used to start up. I think one of the interesting things, that this part was a little bit new to me, but when we went to the bank, they saw that we had some funds and they saw that we had the passion. So that's where we were able to get our jump start. Now we literally have a relationship built with our bank. So, I mean, I'm not going to go out and buy Tesla tomorrow, or Nvidia and that kind of stuff. They won't finance me for that. But to get another store going, as long as I'm doing it at a correct pace, I can get the funding from the bank that I've established a relationship with at this time. So I know there's other things, and I get stuff in the, solicited in the mail, and if I'm, somewhere, I see other bankers, and they're, always, hey, don't forget about us and all that kind of stuff. But that personal relationship I have with that, smaller town bank group has been a massive resource for us.
Yeah. And I want to put a nice underline underneath that, Tim. I'm very familiar with using lines of credit, construction lines of credit, term loans that are shorter term to finance rapid growth. I built 8 restaurants with my team. Over a course of 20 months, there was no universe where we had enough cash flow coming out of our current restaurants to support all of that rapid deploy of capital. So we did use some financing. And I think your point here is super valid. The most likely source for any kind of franchise restaurant funding, if you're talking about banks, in my experience, is that local and regional banking relationship. Now, a lot of franchisors do indeed have established banking relationships. And that does matter to a bank, right? Like the specific setup of the franchise, how old the franchise organization is, its relative levels of success, et cetera. But it is available. It's really interesting. And when rates are low, it's a great play. It's a great, right? You just got to be really mindful of how you manage that on your balance sheet, right? Jonathan, I wonder if you want to speak to this point a little bit and give some of your thoughts on what you see amongst your clients, like the relative, what do their balance sheets look like these days? Because what I have seen is over the last few years, bank lending's really dried up, or stated another way, if it's even available, it's very high interest rates. Just we're adjusting to a sort of a new normal of cost of capital around 8% plus. What are some things that you've seen sort of as trends kind of over the last few years? And where do you think we're headed now with respect to financing options for franchise growth?
Yeah, I've seen a pretty big explosion in alternative lending for franchising. So I have clients that have been with the bank that they've gotten financing. They might have $8 or $9 million on their balance sheet from the same bank that helped them grow to twice their size. Bank comes back and says, hey, you know what? We're putting a pause on any more loans. We're not funding any growth. And they call me and they're like, what am I supposed to do? The bank that holds all of our credit is telling me I can't get another 500,000 to build a new store, or 800, whatever the number is. So you're seeing this really quick explosion in private credit funds, literally just alternative lending companies that are lending at pretty high interest rates, but are getting creative with terms such as, interest only for 12 months. And then you got a balloon payment after 36 months. And people are getting very creative in the lending space. We have a partnership with a lender that's in one specific brand only, and I won't mention it because I promised them I wouldn't. But they saw the need early on, and so they're issuing loans to just this one particular brand, but they know exactly what it costs to open a store, and they're building really creative loans because the banks are just having a really hard time. And if they are lending, the rates, first of all, it's an incredibly painful experience to try to go get financing from your traditional big bank. So I fully support what you said earlier. The local regional bank is your first place to go. Highly encourage that and support that idea. And then secondarily, there's always the play of, I hate to sound like a broken record, but the SBA is very attractive right now. We do a lot of work with a company called Franchisee, which is a kind of like the Zillow of franchise searching. So if you're looking to buy a franchise, you don't know what to buy, you go there and they'll match you with a brand. And every one of those brands and franchisees I talk to that are looking to buy another franchise, the first question is always around financing, because the franchisor wants them to show up at discovery day with pre-approval for financing. So they're going, I need to connect with somebody who can finance me to build my first location in X brand. And they're all having a really hard time getting that done. And so you're seeing it all over the place, but there are options. There's a lot of resources that sometimes you got to ask the right people. And then all of a sudden you find out there's this really cool well you can go to get capital. What I see a lot of times too is people turning to equity partners sometimes too early too, because they throw their hands up and go, well, I don't have any way to grow unless I take on a 50% partner. Maybe that makes sense for you. And if so, great. but I would encourage people before they do that or before they go take some hard money loan that they're going to be kicking themselves for in 6 months to do some research or, obviously reach out to one of the three of us, because I'm sure we can help you connect with somebody that can do that. But it's an interesting environment in the lending space right now, for sure.
It is. Let me follow that on, Jonathan, if I may, because there's a question in the chat that I want to specifically address. How do you think that the lending environment is affecting the resale of franchises? So let's say, my experience as I sold my units back in 2018, we retained an investment bank because we were a larger company. We were doing over $16 million a year in revenue. We were doing, a significant clip between $2 and $3 million of EBITDA consolidated. We retained an investment bank to help manage our exit and shop our deal as a package. We also had a huge territory. We ended up actually selling back to the franchisor who exercised their right of first refusal, and it worked out that way. That was my experience. So the financing of our deal was happening at a higher level that was sort of, not necessarily reflective of the market, right? It was just a much larger transaction. For the average multi-unit or multi-brand owner, how is the financing situation affecting their ability to sell right now? What are you seeing out there?
It's definitely having an impact to the degree. I'll give you a great example that just happened last week. So I have a client, and surprised me, but they have over 40 locations of this particular brand, and they want to go buy another gentleman's 40 plus locations in this brand as well. And he called me and he said, my bank just called me and said they're not going to finance the deal, and you've got to help me find a partner. So I called another banker that I know that loves funding. And again, this goes back to having relationships with banks, because they're not all the same. And some banks look at acquiring cash flowing portfolios as a huge no brainer for them, right? If you're buying something that's kicking off $8 or $9 million a year, you would think any bank in the country would go, yeah, we'll finance you, no problem. But it's shocking how many of them are still kind of put their hands up and going, hey, we need to solidify our deposits, so we're not doing any more loans right now. And so, of course, I called another bank that I knew, and the guy was like, yeah, please introduce me right away. We'd love to finance it. And now they're putting the term sheets together and all that. But that guy was scared for a minute, where he didn't even think he could do the deal or even consider buying the guy, because he didn't think he'd get the financing. And there's a general sense amongst multi-units right now where you're so reliant on your buyer having financing that it is slowing down transactions. Like, you're seeing transactions that are coming to a screeching halt, because the buyer put an LOI in front of them for X times EBITDA, right? Whatever that is, 4, 5, 6 times EBITDA. And then their bank is like, no, we're not financing that. And then they have to pull out of the deal. And it's a bad look for everybody. And so it is having an impact. But I think if you, again, going back to being proactive and thinking about the exit strategy earlier than later, and having a partner that can see what you're trying to do to back you and help you get there, is so critical. And there are people that'll do it. It's not like banks aren't lending at all. You just have to be strategic about who you're working with.
Yeah. There's a question from the audience about where to potentially market the sale of your franchises. And I'm going to just sort of take this one directly, since I did a number of resales when I ran franchise administration for Focus Brands. And so, Cheryl, how I would answer this is, if you are looking to exit your business and you would like to sell one or more of your franchises, talking to a broker who specializes in restaurant resale, I think specifically franchise ones, is a good place to start to understand what the market looks like specifically in your area, and whether or not you should sell all of the units as a package deal, or sell them off by more of like a market, or maybe individually in some cases. Because in certain instances, there may be more value to the business selling it as a bundle as opposed to breaking it off in pieces. But I would suggest, especially in this economy, go find a great broker. Any one of us on this call could probably make some recommendations for you. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our team afterwards. We can help you with that. I wanted to kind of do one last question around sort of the financial health of this business. Tim, Jonathan, here's the question. And I'd love to start with you, Tim, if we could. what is the thing, if you had like a time machine and you could go back and set it up perfectly from the beginning, like from a financial approach, like, is there anything that you would have done differently about the accounting practices, the financial needs of the business, anything like that? Because I think while we're on this topic, sometimes we can get a little bit surprised. Like, you know, the number for the build, you know, the number for payroll, you may even have like really good pro forma planning for like the rest of the year, your first year in business. But if you had to go back and give some advice to like yourself on day one, like what would you kind of say, hey, whoa, watch out for this with respect to finance or accounting?
I'd say first thing, and we kind of talked about this the other day, your accounting partner is very critical. I kind of bounced around from accountant to accountant before we found one that we liked at this point, and this person knows a lot about the industry we're in. Why do I think that's important? Because they can help you find anomalies in your numbers that maybe you just didn't see, and they can kind of talk to you since they have enough experience around other franchisees, and in my case, around other restaurateurs. That's probably the biggest thing I can think of at this point in time. Other than I can say one thing from experience. It's very easy to get attached to people as you're out there. Your philosophies and how you want to run your business are really critical. You have to stick to them. So when you see that people aren't rowing in the same direction as you, and you can tell they're going to be kind of a drain on yourself and everybody else, I hate to say it, but you need to get rid of that person. It's
Isn't that the
something I
trick?
learned the hard way.
No, Tim, I couldn't agree more. And that's as much a company culture and team values thing, I think, internally to your own
Yeah.
employees, but it also applies to your vendors. Your
Yep.
vendors are an extension of your team. And I will also kind of put a star next to something you said, and this is in my experience, restaurant specific accounting firms, right? They have done this, they understand a standard restaurant chart of accounts. They understand the nuances and can be as much a strategist for you as someone who is guarding and maintaining clean books for you. Because I say this all the time, garbage in, garbage out, right? Like, you really need a good accountant to take you to a place where the numbers are helping to validate the things you're instinctively seeing in the business. That is the whole point of having good books. It's not just to get a loan, right? You need those numbers to validate your instincts. And in my experience, I will second that having a restaurant specific accountant like Jonathan,
Yeah.
not an intentional plug, but that's the point, right? We want to have someone on today who could like really show the power of having someone around your numbers to help you understand the performance of your business. Jonathan, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I mean, you guys nailed it, Tim. What you said is exactly right. I mean, we set the firm up where every accountant working for that brand knows that brand. So whether it's Zaxby's, who Tim you mentioned earlier, we have Zaxby's specific accountants. If it's Jersey Mike's, if it's Marco's Pizza, if it's a health and wellness concept, like, we don't have somebody working on an Orange Theory that's also working on a Jersey Mike's account, because they're such different worlds. And yes, they're both franchises, but you can't look at the COGS or the labor numbers for a Sweat House location and have the same takeaway you would if you're looking at a Zaxby's or a Chicken Salad Chick or whatever it might be. You have to understand, if you see labor jump 2% or even a point month over month or quarter over quarter, you've got to be able to call that out to the client. Like, I've got to be able to tell Tim, hey, we're looking at your numbers. This time last year, your labor was 2% lower than it is right now. Like, let's have a conversation about that. Or, hey, your COGS went through the ceiling last month. Like, what's going on at the store level? And have conversations about that. And we thoughtfully built the firm around that thesis, because at the end of the day, the person that is your accountant they become an extension of your operating team, whether they're an outsourced accountant at a firm like Pivot or they're a bookkeeper that you've hired internally. And we have those conversations all the time with people, right? Who they started out with one or two locations. They have a bookkeeper they hired who kind of sort of knows the industry, but they just really are a bookkeeper who are kind of feeling their way, building the plane as it goes off the cliff, figuring out how to understand a restaurant P&L. And they don't really get it, but they're learning. And I would just encourage exactly what you said, Lauren. I would encourage anybody who's a restaurant specifically, or any franchise owner, but specifically in restaurant franchising, hire a firm that knows restaurant accounting, because if you don't, to your point or earlier on, it is really hard to unwind decisions that you might make, whether it is your chart of accounts that's set up in some funky way that is, and by the way, rebuilding your chart of accounts in the middle of the year is exhausting, and it costs a lot of money for the franchisee to have to pay somebody to do that. So yeah, I fully, what you both said is exactly right.
You might as well ask me to close the store and have to redo the plumbing and
That's right.
shut down for a few weeks. I mean, it is that much of a pain. And by the way, we did not plan this. I mean, these
No,
are
no,
natural
yeah,
reactions.
just organic, which is
Yeah.
great. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of those things are somewhat preventative in nature, but I will also flag here, this is some of the art of picking a good franchisor to partner with. So I want to kind of dive down into that topic for a minute, because Jonathan, I know you work with a wide range of franchisees across multiple brands. And Tim, you have just gone from one franchisor to now having two in your portfolio. And one of the things that shocks me sometimes, since we're talking about a chart of accounts, is that a lot of franchisors do not dictate what that chart of accounts is for the brand. And they don't even have a standard sort of profit and loss statement of this is what good looks like for the brand. So, average food costs are between, 17 and 19%, but, your chicken should be between 8 and 10% of that. Like, just things like that, that really break the operations down for you, so you can compare your own P&L apples to apples to what the franchisor's company stores are doing if they own and operate them, and also what the system averages are. That's just something in my experience that has, in my mind, separated good franchisors from great ones, when they really help you master your numbers, because everyone is singing off the same song sheet. And it seems so simple, and yet I'm shocked regularly when franchisors don't do that. Tim, what are some other things that you think separate a good from a great franchisor when you're looking for someone in a brand to partner with? Like, what are some of the things that you're looking for beyond, let's say, a standard chart of accounts?
Yeah, I'd say I'm looking for the experience they bring to people. At the end of the day, like on the restaurant side, we serve food, but it's, the more there's an experience, the more you can technically charge your guests that come in. So I think the food is really critical, and that experience that goes with it. After that, I'm just looking for what looks like, and this sometimes is a gut thing, but what I think are good people who seem to have the right things going. What are they doing with regards to marketing, maybe loyalty programs, those kind of things, little things that you kind of have in the restaurant world. How they, before I joined Vicious Biscuit, they had 7 corporate stores. I went to 6 of them. And I went in and I wanted to see if the people that I was interviewing were that did the assistant managers and the store managers and the other folks that work there, the other team, did they have the same kind of give and take with the franchisors? So I think it's important to kind of do that type of relation, or that type of research to figure out what's going on. That is kind of the main thing. What you just mentioned in the beginning of that, Lauren, is since I don't have a high expectation sometimes of everybody out there, and good intentions and all that kind of stuff. You expect people to kind of fall a little short. I think the one thing that we did see about Chicken Style Chick was the fact that whenever they did something, they did it in the corporate stores first, and they put it on their shoulders before they basically forced it on the rest of us, which I thought that was a good compromise, a good important piece to see. So it was those little things like that that I saw that made me want to join up with Vicious Biscuit and Chicken Salad Chick.
Jonathan, how about you? What are some things that you see as commonalities amongst the great franchisors?
Yeah, I mean, kind of piggybacking off of what Tim said, I actually talked to a franchisee this morning in a brand, and he was talking about how he got into the brand he's in because when he signed up to buy their first 2 locations, and he's got 15 stores now, and when he got his first 2, he loved the fact that when he met the franchisor, there he referred to it as they were a hugging group and not a handshake group. And I love that because that particular brand in the last few years has been absorbed by private equity. And since that happened, he said it's a completely different environment when you go to the conference. It's handshakes, not hugs. And he
Mhm.
said that was a turnoff for me. And I'm seeing it happen more and more and more at every one of these meetings that we have. It's becoming more and more professional or businessy, and it's not that family vibe that I got when I first bought into the brand. And that really resonated with me because you can see it. If you work with enough franchisees in a brand, you can tell what their vibe is with their franchisor.
Hmm.
Chicken Salad Chick obviously is a great example of the preferred version of that, where you feel comfortable, you like them, you feel like you're kind of a family.
Hmm.
Yeah, you're paying them a royalty fee, but you're paying them a royalty fee because they've set up a business that you love and you can get behind, and people like the product, and that's what you want. I think there are situations where a franchise. I go back to you mentioned brokers earlier and FSOs in the world, and these companies that sell licenses on behalf of concepts. And sometimes what gets lost in that is you actually feeling like you're comfortable with the franchisor at a personal level where you can
Hmm.
trust them. And if a brand is big enough or it's private equity owned, that can be a challenge. And I'm not saying a franchisor that's owned by private equity is not worth exploring, but you've got to be comfortable with the fact that it's a business. You're buying into a business, and
Hmm.
they're looking at royalties and revenue, and they're looking at it as a business. They're not as concerned necessarily as a startup franchise or an emerging brand where the person who started the concept has put their heart and soul into it to get the first 20 open before they franchised it. And if you're lucky enough to come across a brand like that, that's awesome and good for you. And like I said, those exist. So it's really just if you're a passive investor looking to get into franchising and you just want to make a return on your money and you don't want to be involved, maybe that kind of reduces your stress over trying to find that perfect fit. But I think 9 times out of 10, you want to be comfortable with the ownership at the highest level.
Yeah.
And you're saying something really big there, Jonathan. The relationship that like Lauren and I developed with other franchisors, franchisees at Chicken Salad Chick, that was critical as well because we expected them to sell out to private equity and those kind of things. So you know, so the friends that we had within the franchise, the other franchise owners, that was so big for us to kind of see what kind of people were coming into the cycle. So
Yeah, and I'm gonna just sort of put a pin in this for all of us and say, look, as someone who now builds, franchises, who is private equity, who will sell to private equity someday, the brands that we have roles in, as investors, you can't always control who the CEO is, how involved the founder is in the brand, who sits on the board, and who the ultimate owners are. And I think that network of franchisees ultimately are your kind of your fail safe, whether you use them as an informal sounding board to share best practices, to just gut check on certain things before you react to them. And Tim, like you and I were talking about, one of the things I look for in good to great franchisors is the open and regular communication. It's actually something that we teach, coach, and train to when we're building franchise systems. And it's not just about a one-way communication from the franchisor to the franchisee that is open, transparent, and honest. It's a collaboration, right? And it's the ability for the franchisees, whether through a FAQ or through other mechanisms, to be heard and seen on a regular and continuing basis. Because franchisors who do not listen to the issues that are being faced in real time from their franchisees will fail. There's no question about it. Because the best source of information in most of these systems are your operators, which overwhelmingly in these systems are those franchisees, right? So I would add that sort of to the list of things to look for in a good franchisor is how does that cycle of communication work? What are those infrastructures around it, and how frequently do they solicit feedback? What, not just from a FAQ, but from the franchise community as a whole. I think that's a make or break kind of thing over time. I wanted to kind of help us close this out. We have 5 minutes left, and go back to the two of you and say, if you could give one piece of advice to our audience who are future multi-unit franchisees, maybe of multiple brands, what are the pieces of advice that you would give them? Jonathan, let's start with you.
Well, I know it's going to sound like an obvious response because I own an accounting firm, but my softball response would be don't do your own books.
Mm.
Don't try to do your own bookkeeping because it's not worth your time. And I've heard people say this so many times where they say, well, it only takes me 20 minutes to reconcile the month. Okay. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. But um, to Tim's point, find somebody in the restaurant industry that knows restaurant accounting and have them do your books or
Mhm.
franchise accounting in general, because it can be such an important crux of your growth. And all the things that we've discussed, a lot of what we talked about all comes back to having reliable financials, period. So, let somebody who knows what they're doing do it. And you may be an accountant. You might even be a CPA, and that's great. And there are a lot of CPAs that own franchises, and I talk to them often. But even they are typically they're the first ones to say, yeah, it's not worth my time to do my own books, and they outsource it or they have an in-house team. So that would be my piece of advice.
I'm going to second that. I think that's really accurate. Tim, how about you?
Um, I think this is something that became more and more apparent to us as we were going from one group to adding another. You have to know your lane. My lane, as an example, is not accounting, so I'm not going to try to open up an accounting franchise or anything like that. It's not what I'm passionate about, and I'm glad Jonathan is, because we need people who are passionate about that. We took the time to come through this and realize that we love fast casual. We love the fact that we love being around people and serving them and that kind of stuff. And that's where we are in our zone and where we know we can make money. So know what you're passionate about, because we all know there are days out there where you're going to get slugged in the face. A guest is going to say something. Something's going to happen. The truck order didn't come in, whatever the case may be. What's going to get you up the following day? And it better be that thing that you're passionate about, such as serving people in a fast casual environment, whatever the case may be. So that's my jam.
No, I think that's true, because that passion and that level of commitment to the purpose and the mission behind the brand, if you really are buying into it, it is going to get you through those really hard times when you really just want to scream in a walk-in cooler, right? And I think you've got to believe in building something together. And I think this would be a good time to remind everybody that these franchise agreements last 20 years sometimes, which is longer than the average American marriage. So really think about your franchise growth as a serious long-term commitment. And that is sort of my piece of advice to everybody here today. I just want to thank both you, Tim and Jonathan, for joining us today. This has been such a fruitful conversation. To everyone on the call today, you can find both Tim and Jonathan on LinkedIn. They're both on there. So if you need to reach out, you can find them both on LinkedIn. If you need any support on any of these topics that we've discussed today, you're welcome to also reach out to the Full Course team anytime for a discovery call. We are available at fullcourse.com, where you can book a call with us directly. I also want to invite everyone to scan the QR code on your screen today. That is for our next Rising Tide, the topic of which will be tech tools and trends for the next generation of restaurant brands that are coming up in the industry, franchised or not. We would love to see you there, and are excited to see you guys participate in that next Rising Tide, because it's going to be a really, really tool and technique heavy one where we'll give out a lot of resources. Again, thanks to both Jonathan and Tim for joining us today, and to our audience for submitting questions. We appreciate you and hope to see you on the next Rising Tide. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Lauren.